Alright, so we're going to continue working with two-dimensional arrays here. Here's the program we just created in the previous video where we have a two-dimensional array and we get an input into it and we have a output of that data in the table in the format of a table. Alright, so first thing I'm going to clean up here and show you how to use two-dimensional arrays with functions. I'm going to clean this output up because I want to use it in multiple places, so I'm going to take it and move it into this display function here. I'll leave that one statement there for a second because I'm going to take this out of there and replace this call with that statement. Alright, so I'll put the value, put a tab in between them, and then a new line once it finishes the line, display value, but now it needs to take in the complete array. So in this case, when we have our array call, we don't have a called here yet, so let's just call it data for something generic. So really this can work with any two-dimensional array once we're done here. So it needs to know two things, right, the two indexes. But when we're passing data, we only provide one of the dimensions, and in this case it's going to be the number of columns. So we got our variable up there, a constant called days, and that's what we're going to use. So we don't have to provide it the first indexing size. We can, but you do not have to. So what this allows you to do though is to pass it a two-dimensional array with unknown number of rows, but the number of columns has to be known. Alright, and everything else should stay the same. Right, except obviously we need to change this so now it's indexing into it. And employees, which is changing for every row. But first we're going to do all the columns with numday. Alright, so with that one change, right, and what we're going to do, I'm going to comment this out, and we're going to put a call into that function which we just called display value. Let's change it to values because it's actually doing more than one. Display values, and we're going to pass it hours. Oops, what happened there? Display hours. Got an extra S in there. Okay. So without changing anything else, we'll run this real quick and show you that we should get that same table we saw in the previous video. I haven't changed where the input's coming from. Right, quickly put the data in like I did before. And even numbers, and there's our table. Alright, so nothing has changed. We still have the 7 columns and the 3 rows. Alright, nice thing about using the, oops, sorry, you couldn't see that. There it is, sorry. Alright, forgot to move it over. Alright, but there you see me inputting all the data as I did before, and there's the output. Alright. So, the nice thing is I can change the number of rows if I want by simply changing this constant. That's the nice thing of using those constants. I'll show you that in a second, but let's clean this up a little more here. One that's going to get the inputs. You see I already had a function called getInputs. So it was already passing in a one-dimensional array. We need to make it a two-dimensional, so we'll change hours to just data again. Right? Remember the variable names do not really matter. Right, because they get matched together, the parameters in the arguments. So we're going to change hours here to data, and we're going to need our second input, so let's just come down here and copy these two for loops and comment them out because we're not going to use them there. We're going to use them here. Alright, so now I've got to change hours to data. So all I'm doing is moving around where we're getting the input from. And main cleaned up very nicely. It's down to just these two functions. And once again, I'm going to compile it and run it, and this time I'll show you me doing the input. Alright, and here we go. There's the window. So again, going through it, nothing should change. The output should look identical. The prompting for the input should be identical. Do it even numbers. And there's your output again, still 7 columns, 3 rows. Nothing's really changed. Alright, so let's just show you one more thing. Alright, and I'm going to initialize this a little bit. Alright, not fully. Alright, so normally when we initialize arrays, we gotta have out 2 parentheses. And with 2 dimensionals, we gotta define each of the rows with more curly brackets in between. Oops. Alright, and they gotta be comma separated. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for the first column. Alright, comma in between them. Just gonna put it down a different line so you see the different rows. Don't have to do this. You can just put them all in one line if you really wanted to. Alright, so there's our second row. The second row, I'm not going to put as much data in it as I have been. Just kind of show you what's going on, what will happen. And then, oops, curly bracket again, and the last row. And we're going to put in some random numbers there. And let's stick with our even thing. Oops. There we go. 4, 6, 8. Again, do a partial. Alright. And I'm going to have it display that table before we do the inputs. Alright, so you see that how it's initialized, and then it'll start prompting for the inputs. Alright, and there's a window. Let me slide it over for you. There we go. So let's look at this initialization. I did 1 through 7. Look at row 1, it's 1 through 7. On the second row I said 7, 6, 5, 4, 7, 6, 5, 4. The rest are zeros. So anything that's not defined in the initialization is automatically set to a 0. Same thing happened on the third row, 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8, and the rest are 0. Now it's just prompting me for the data. And we'll continue what we've been doing. Alright, 7, oops, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And in the last one, I'll change it up and do odd numbers so you actually see all the data changing on this one. 11 and 13. And there you see everything's now filled in, all the zeros are gone. And the last row has the odd numbers as I put them in. Alright, so nice function there. Right, it takes in, and I'm using it multiple times, takes in an array any size. Now the problem is if I change this constant, I can change the number of rows to a 4. Right, just to show you what happens here, compile it and run it again. I don't have to change my functions or anything of the code. Right, and there it is initially running the first 3 columns like we saw the first time, the first 3 rows I mean. The fourth row that I added is all zeros. Since I didn't put anything into the initialization, it automatically sets it to 0. So this should ask me for 4 weeks of data. There's week 1, week 2, we'll do the even now. And we'll do odd this time. And there's all the data. If I change the number of columns, things will get screwed up down in the initialization, because if I change this down to a 6 number of days, the first row already has 7 pieces of initialization data, so it won't compile in that sense. But you can see changing those constants does allow me to quickly change the data size and not a lot of code.